Hi, third graders. So today, one of your reading assignments, you're going to be reading from your Wonders book, a story called Whooping Cranes. The genre, the type of story it is an expository text. Expository is something that we're going to be working on when we come back to school next week, but it means it's true. These are facts. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. And you're going to learn about the whooping cranes. You have two choices today. You may choose to read the story independently, or you may choose to follow along and listen to me read it to you. So I'm in my Wonders book. Let me see if I can shrink this down. No, I can't. And it starts on page 172. You can see here's our title. Like half of the bird, there he is, or she, whooping cranes in danger. It's by Susan E. Goodman. And there's a question that I want us to be thinking about as we're reading or listening. How can people help animals survive? We're going to read about whooping cranes and find out how a group of scientists are helping these birds to survive. So here we go. The reading begins on page 173. There are many types of heroes. Superheroes in comics catch bad guys. Astronauts risk their lives to explore space. Doctors devote their careers to finding cures for dreadful diseases. Our story has heroes too. Scientists and their helpers are saving the whooping cranes. Whoopers need help. Long ago, whooping cranes lived all over North America. Then people started hunting them. Farmers and builders took over the marshes these birds called home. Whoopers were losing the resources that they needed. By 1941, only 15 whooping cranes were left in the wild. It looked as if they could die out forever. Some people refused to let this happen. The government reserved land for these cranes to live on. Hunters could not enter this wild refuge. Scientists guarded this tiny flock in Texas. 70 years later, its population has grown to 200 birds. But one flock is not enough. A disease or storm could wipe it out completely. Scientists decided to create a new flock in Wisconsin. Two groups of birds are safer than one. I'm moving over to page 175. A tough problem. Building a new flock of whoopers is harder than it seems. These cranes are born up north. Then they migrate south in fall to avoid the cold winter. In spring, they fly back north for the summer. Who says birds aren't smart? Scientists had a big problem to solve. They couldn't just grab some whoopers from the first flock to start a new one. When returning north, adult birds will only go back to the place they were born. So all members of the second flock had to be born in the new spot. How could that happen? Who would their parents be? A clever solution. 11 eggs were about to hatch in spring of 2001. Their parents were ready to welcome these chicks to the world. Their puppet parents, that is. So look at here. You can see this puppet. And the little caption says, "This puppet takes the place of this whooping crane chick's mother." Oh, it's probably got some food. Look at how cute the new little chick is. All right, let's keep reading to see what happens. Scientists had to raise the chicks, but the whoopers weren't supposed to get used to people. The birds needed to be wild to stay safe, so humans pretended to be whooping cranes. They wore white costumes to hide their faces and bodies. They wore puppets on their arms to deal with the chicks. The caretakers never spoke near the birds. They talked to the chicks by playing tapes of real whooping cranes. They also had real whoopers in this refuge. The chicks needed to know what actual grown up whooping cranes looked like. Caretakers used the puppets to teach the chicks the same skills that real parents would. The puppets showed them where to swim and where to sleep. They even taught the chicks how to get along with other cranes. The puppets could teach most things, but they couldn't teach the chicks how to fly. So it says, here's our caption. Scientists used puppets to train the babies how to eat and drink and where to find the right kind of food. Here's something for you to kind of quiz yourself on, a little check. Why did the scientists wear white costumes and use puppets? If you don't already know the answer, if you don't remember, you can reread to find out. The biggest parent of them all. Pilots of ultralight planes could do the job. They put on their costumes and got to work. At first, the plane just rolled across the ground. A pilot played a special crane call, which meant, "Come on, follow me." That's exactly what the chicks did. Of course, the treats given out by the pilot's puppet helped a lot. As days passed, the plane sped up. The chicks did too. Flapping their wings helped them to go faster. It also made their wings stronger. At last, they ran fast enough and flapped hard enough, and up they went. Soon the cranes were flying almost every day. They had to. Fall was coming. They had to be strong enough to migrate more than 1,200 miles to Florida. So here's the plane, as they were calling it, and you can see that the human is in costume. It's pretty incredible the way that they're teaching them and that they believe it too. Operation Migration. Finally, the big day came. This experiment started with 11 eggs. 2 chicks had gotten sick and died. 1 couldn't fly well and moved to a zoo. The other 8 whoopers were ready to go. 2 ultralights revved their engines. 1 would lead the birds. The other would track down cranes that strayed from the flock. The planes took off. The birds did too. They were on their way. Planes and birds were only part of the migration. A crew drove south too. The birds had to eat and rest each night. Scientists had chosen safe places along the way. The crew rushed ahead to set up pens for them to stay in. So here you can see them side by side. That's pretty incredible. They're helping them to migrate. The trip was hard. The cranes flew up to 95 miles on good days, only 20 on bad ones. Often rain or wind kept them from flying at all. One sad night, a giant storm ripped their pen apart. Caretakers spent hours searching and calling for their whoopers. All were fine except one. He had flown into a power line and died. After 48 days, the plane flew over the birds' winter home in Florida. A caretaker on the ground played the whooping crane call. The whooper swooped in for a landing. The first part of the journey was a success. So you can see this little map, and you can see their traveling distance, right? They made it down here. They went from here to here. Pretty incredible. This is how they migrated, where they flew when they migrated. All right, next page. This is page 180, A Warm Winter. What was one of the first thing the whoopers learned about Florida? Crabs are delicious. The shells were hard, but the meat was soft. Puppet parents helped the whoopers learn to peck them apart. At first, the cranes stayed in a pen as big as a football field. It even had a pond with a fake whooper parent in it to make them feel safe. Actually, they were safer in the pond. Cranes usually sleep in the water at night. Splashing sounds warn them if a predator is nearby. In time, caretakers took the top off the pen. The cranes flew out to explore more of their new home. Caretakers hid, watching them enjoy yummy shrimp and snails. Generally, the whoopers returned to the pen at night. Sometimes they didn't. 2 cranes were killed by bobcats. Now there were 5. And so here you can see the whoopers learning to eat new foods like crab in their winter homes in Florida. You can see right here. In spring, the birds started eating more. That was a good sign. They were storing energy for a trip north. Still, the scientists wondered, would the cranes know when to leave? Homeward bound. We'll see. One day, caretakers heard radio signals. The cranes had leg bands and sent out these sounds. The whoopers were on the move. That's a good thing. Caretakers jumped in 2 trucks to follow the signals. They had to hurry. The trip home would be much faster. Air has currents just like water does. Birds ride these currents the same way that surfers ride waves. The cranes traveled more than 200 miles the very first day. They were headed north. But would they remember their route? Soon, scientists had another thing to worry about. One crane left the group. A truck turned to track her. Where was she going and why? So here's something to think about as you read or already read. What were the scientists worried about? So think about that in these last couple of pages. If you're not sure, you can look back. Day by day, the cranes kept flying. Then the group of 4 reached Lake Michigan. They began to circle. Oh no, thought the trackers, they do not know which way to go. The whoopers kept circling around and around. After 2 hours, they finally turned west. They were on course. 11 days after leaving Florida, these 4 cranes came in for a landing. They were very close to the pen they grew up in. What about the last crane? She ended up visiting a flock of sandhill cranes for a while. Sandhill cranes are relatives of whooping cranes. 2 weeks later, she came back home to the refuge. Yay, that's wonderful. A new beginning. The first migration was finished, but the whooping crane's recovery had just begun. The next year, these 5 cranes flew south by themselves. The ultralights were busy leading 16 new chicks. The planes still led migrations each fall, but now whooping crane parents are leading their own chicks down south. Some of these chicks have grown up enough to have babies of their own. The whooping crane is still threatened. It remains one of America's most endangered birds, but scientists are hopeful. Luckily, the flock keeps getting bigger. Here's one more thing to do to summarize. How are the whooping cranes doing now? Summarize what you learned from a new beginning. So in your mind, or you can tell someone, we're going to do an activity tomorrow that will check your understanding, but be thinking, what do you remember about what the cranes are doing now? And that is the end. Feel free to read about the author, Susan E. Goodman, and you can read about the purpose, why you think she wanted to read and write this story. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Very informative.